I'm not used to having these headsets on. I feel a little boy bandish, or maybe I'm here selling you a ShamWow. I'm not sure, but thank you guys. Appreciate it. We're going to start off with imagining a scenario, and this scenario takes place in 2004. So we're at an airport, and we're on an extended layover. Say our flight's delayed or something. We have an hour or two to kill. So we go to the airport bar, and we sidle up to the bar, and we get our beer, and there's TVs, there's sports, and there's news. And what's happening, and this is 2004, is we're seeing a developing story. And this particular story is the Indian Ocean earthquake that resulted in the tsunami that devastated Indonesia. So we see the pictures, we see the story developing, we see the loss of life, the flooding, the chaos that's happening. Every few minutes, they're updating the estimated death toll, 10,000, then 30,000, then 80,000, and so on. So this is a pretty powerful story that's happening before our eyes, and we start to have an outpouring of sympathy. And when we do that, we're starting to also see, well, there's relief efforts going on, and so if you can pitch in, donate to the Red Cross. And it seems like a good idea. Like, I'd love to take part, I'd love to somehow help and donate if I can. So you know what you have to do at that time is you either have to call them up or possibly go online to redcross.org. So what happens here is not only do you have that call to action, you have to think like, oh, that's something I'd want to do, but you have to make that mental note. When I'm able to do it, I'm going to do that. A little later, I'll perhaps donate to the Red Cross. And then time goes by, and when time goes by, you take your flight, you get home, you check your mail, you unpack, and hopefully you remember. And if you don't remember, maybe you turn on the TV and you see the story as it's continuing to develop, and you still then hopefully have undivided attention where you think, yeah, I should take action. I wanted to donate, I should still donate. So you do decide you can donate. There's other things that can wait, so you do that and you have to get online, and at that point you're essentially entering a typical e-commerce funnel. You have to pull out your credit card and do all the 16 digits and decide your billing information. And then one of the hardest parts is how much should you donate? $100? I mean, that feels like I'm making an impact, but that's a lot of money to part with. Do I have $100 that I feel comfortable sparing? $10, $20? Is that even worth it? I mean, is that going to make an impact? Will I kind of feel like a cheapskate if I only do that? So maybe you settle on $40. So maybe you got through this and you donated. But what's probably happened is that there were a lot of people that saw that story, and a lot of people who saw that call to action and thought, yeah, it would be a really good idea to donate, and it's something I'd be willing to do. But like a typical funnel, as the time goes by and as effort's required, there's drop-offs, and so however many people thought it might be a good idea, probably only a fraction actually ended up donating. But now we'll zoom into the future a little bit, not quite to where we are, but we'll go to 2010. Same situation. We're at our airport, we have our extended layover, and so we're at the bar, and we see a story developing. And this is 2010, so in this case, the story is the Haiti earthquake. And so we're seeing the same type of powerful images, rubble, people being pulled from the rubble in the buildings, lots of chaos in this poor country as there's really hard to have first responders and a real coordinated effort. So we see that call to action again. There's a relief fund. If you can donate, donate to the Red Cross. Things are a little bit different now because we can call and we can get online, but we now have this. We have 90999. We have the text messaging service that allows us to donate $10 to the relief fund, and when we do that, it's seamlessly deducted from our phone bill. We don't even have to think about how much. I'm doing $10, you're doing $10, and we're probably on auto pay on our phone bill, so we're not even seeing that charge. So when we're motivated at a time that we're really motivated to take action, we're enabled to take action as well. And the response to that was pretty incredible. Something like, 43 million people donated to the Red Cross through the text messaging efforts for Haiti. And what's really interesting is, and this is from a Pew survey in 2012 that studied the effects of mobile donations, is that almost everybody, or at least the majority of people, did that as an impulse, basically an impulse purchase on seeing the story and being motivated by what they were seeing on television. And also telling was that once they donated, their interest in the story sort of waned. I mean, this isn't necessarily like if you don't know anybody in that area, it's something that you see and you feel a lot of sympathy for, but then you have other things to go. You go live your life. So a lot of people after they donated didn't necessarily follow the recovery efforts or the reconstruction efforts. They weren't necessarily invested. What that tells you is that if they hadn't donated in that impulse time, they would never have donated. We would not have seen that money. They wouldn't have gone through the funnel that I described from 2004. But that doesn't mean new behaviors aren't being formed. So over half of them donated to subsequent relief efforts through text messaging, probably something like Japan's nuclear reactor event that they had. So all of a sudden, a new form of habit is being developed by a lot of these people who think this is a great way to feel like they're contributing. So that's pretty powerful stuff, and the fact that we can kind of create new habits and engage in new behaviors and get new outcomes from that behavior, which is like great from a donation standpoint. And we've been thinking about frameworks to identify these behaviors for a long time. There's a lot of psychologists. Susan Michi is a health psychologist at King's College in London. BJ Fogg is a Stanford psychologist, runs this persuasive technology lab in Stanford. They both got these sort of models that talk about opportunity and capability and motivation aligning to form behaviors. But we've been thinking about it for a decent amount of time in a lot of different contexts. The idea that if someone's committed to take an action or to go on a path, what can we do to make that as painless as possible and encourage them to do it? It's basically the tenets of transaction funnels like e-commerce or form design, or the idea of usability and what can we do to encourage people who want to make a commitment to go through and follow through on that commitment or that behavior. So we've mostly seen this in micro interactions or at a micro level, which means it's like features of a broader system. So that might be around conversion or engagement or onboarding, these sort of limited ways, or just single impulse activities like the donation through the text. But what we're seeing now, and we're pretty familiar with it over the past 2 or 3 years, but it's really hitting a tipping point, is that at a macro level, we're seeing whole products and services designed around forming and engaging in behavior change or in creating behavior-based outcomes. The idea of the outcome is increased donations, so the behavior is increased text messaging donations. So what that means is what we've really seen as an evolution is the fact that we've seen technology become closer to us. And I also don't mean in the fact that we use it in our daily lives, but it physically has become closer to us. We wear it, we keep it in our pockets, it's ambiently around in our objects in our house. And when technology becomes closer to us, its services become more about us. It's not about like the computer going and doing some math equations in the other room. It's about it actually being about our lives and about the things that we do. So that's what I've been calling behavior change as value proposition. The fact that there's a whole new set of products and services whose core value proposition are about shaping our behaviors so that we can get better outcomes, losing weight, better finances, brushing our teeth more, running more, getting out of debt, whatever it might be, lower energy bills. And what the goal is to say, like, what their goal is, or how we define it, is that their products and services designed and marketed on the premise that their benefits, the value that they offer, that you will receive, are specific to behavior-based outcomes. So if you lose weight, you change your behaviors in this way. If you want to kill your debt, you do these steps and you modify your behavior in a certain way. And there's a couple key characteristics from that. And one is the obvious one is that the proposition is directly tied to these behavior-based outcomes, which means you're going to get, the value is you're going to get a rewarding outcome from those persistent behaviors. Data collection is going to be the primary feature because it is about you and your behaviors, so they have to have the information to understand what your behaviors are so that they meaning the system, the product, or the service, can sit there and help you, guide you towards different behaviors that will have a different outcome. And the system makes prescriptive recommendations or guidance, and that's a big distinction because if I use Gmail or iTunes, I have choices, I have options based on how they've designed it, but they don't tell me necessarily how to use it. There's a really big difference between choices and options and guidance and recommendations, where we're actually being prescriptive and telling you to do something, or that you should do something if you want to achieve a goal. And the behavior change or the progress towards the outcome is measurable. That's also really important because obviously we're talking about something that's a path. It's a linear path. It's a time-based path towards something. And that could be about maintaining something. That path could be about, hey, you're staying on this level. You've lowered your energy bills. Now we're going to help you track and stay low. So it doesn't always have to be about a growth path. It could be about eliminating habits, or it could be about staying steady on things. But nonetheless, it has to be measurable. That's going to be part of the feedback loops. So what we have now is we know that these devices are closer to us, and what that means is we start to actually develop a type of a relationship with them. If you remember Fawn Ellis's talk on Tuesday, she talked about modeling and designing for relationships with technology kind of patterned after our actual relationships with each other. And what happens when you build that relationship? When you have friends, when you have family, when you have doctors or financial advisors, and you hope to model the same types of things that they have with the things that you have a relationship with in products and services or technology. What you're doing is you have influence. You're inviting influence. These people in your lives that you have a relationship with, you engage them in a way that you hope that they will influence you in some way. It might be about asking for advice or for guidance. It might be modeling something that you like about them. If I really think that that's really great that they pursue this and I want to be like that, then I look up to them. So that's also, as we have a direct relationship with technology and with the products and services around us, we're inviting influence. We're actually hoping that they will help us and influence us in a certain way. And so if a couple of you have followed me, or some people I know, you know I've been obsessed with some of the quantified self stuff in both financial services and in like health and activity trackers. These are all mine, and they're not even all the ones that I own. But what it comes down to is when you're trying to get those outcomes, the core things that make that up are habits and decisions. We want to form new habits, and we have to do that by having informed decisions as well. And what that really comes down to is not simply behavioral psychology and understanding the triggers and the motivations like in the Red Cross donation. It's also thinking about it from a behavioral economic standpoint. And the simplest way to describe behavioral economics is the idea that traditional economics is that we're going to make rational decisions that are in our best interest that will have good future outcomes. So we're going to weigh the cost benefits or the pros and cons, and we'll make the sensible choice that's in our best interest over the long haul. But the reality is that we often make less rational choices that are more about things like instant gratification or loss aversion. Some of you might be familiar with a famous behavioral economist named Dan Ariely. He's written the books Predictably Irrational and The Upside to Irrationality. So you know that, but just by the book titles, you kind of know his take on how we make decisions. And there's kind of an anecdote that illustrates that. And I would say is if I was with you right now and I had a box of chocolates, and I offered you this box of chocolates if you waited 1 month. In 1 month, I'll give you this box of chocolates. Or you can have half of this box of chocolates right now. So the traditional economic is that, well, I get double the return if I wait a month. That's what's in my best interest. I'll get a full box of chocolates in 1 month. But what most people do is they pick the half box of chocolates because that full box of chocolates is kind of far away. It's kind of abstract. I don't know what's going to happen in a month. Whereas the half box of chocolates, I can get that right now. I can smell it. I'll be able to taste it. I can imagine that satisfaction right away. And that basically sums up our relationship with our credit cards and our ability to save, our ability to eat properly or choose to exercise or not exercise. We're making these decisions. And that's a lot of what these products and services are starting to aim to do. And they're starting to form around the idea of informed decisions and hopefully then better habits. But it's a tough code to crack. The book Nudge, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, they coined choice architecture, which I really like that terminology because I think it describes a lot of what we do in our design process, whether we're product managers, information architects, whatever it might be, in thinking about design decisions or really about choice architecture. And the anecdote they have in their book is a case study around a cafeteria and how you rearrange the cafeteria to help people make possibly better decisions. And basically short circuit the half box of chocolates mentality. So, if all of a sudden a banana is right at my fingertips and the cookies are 10 feet away, some people will be highly motivated, which means they'll go and get those cookies. They got to have those cookies, right? But some people will be like, well, what's easy and convenient for me? Well, grabbing the banana is easy and convenient, and then I can go up and go back to my work. And so that choice architecture is really about short-circuiting some of that behavioral decision-making that we make and seeing if we can influence that in some way. And so a lot of these things become behavioral economic problems in how we are able to make our decisions and start to form new habits. And my own personal framework that I've used, and this isn't complete, but for time, this is like what I thought are the most important components, are collection, which means the collection of information and data, the visualization, which is about the ability of feedback and also feed-forward loops, and then also the storytelling, which I've termed as the way I think about framing and anchors, and I'll talk a little bit about what these mean. And as far as the sensors and data, I won't spend a lot of time on it because I think we already know it, we live with it now, but the main takeaway is that The Internet of Things is here, right? We're not waiting for it anymore. It's not sort of like there's exemplar little instances of it there. It's everything. There's going to be smart shirts. There's going to be smart socks. There's going to be smart basketballs. They already are. This is a basketball that has an accelerometer in it and a Bluetooth in it, so you can measure from a training standpoint your basketball activity. So the Internet of Things are here, and we need to resign ourselves to the fact that if it can be connected, it will be connected, and we know that. But now if we get to that, I mean, that's almost like the code that we've started to crack. Sensors are small, and a lot of people like Jawbone and Nike and Basis, they're starting to figure out the hardware, which is a real bitch to figure out. So now what's happening is, what do we do with that? What do we do with that collection? Well, we have feedback loops. And that's something that most people in this room are probably familiar with. It's an interaction design principle of what's the feedback you get when you take an action. But I don't think we realize, I think we take for granted what we're able to do with feedback loops compared to 10 years ago and 20 years ago and beyond that. And an example I thought about when I was thinking about how feedback loops existed, say 30, 40 years ago, I was watching Mad Men, the show Mad Men on AMC, and it was the season when the main character, Don Draper's ex-wife, she was pregnant in real life, the actress, and so they wrote a story where she gained a bunch of weight. And she was a bit of a trophy wife, and she had been a former model, so there was a lot of value she placed in her appearance and her look, especially in keeping appearances as a good homemaker and a good wife to a powerful man, whether it was her new husband or her old husband. So the storyline they wrote is that she went to Weight Watchers, and she went to Weight Watchers once a week, and what they did as a group is that they'd weigh, sort of Biggest Loser style, they'd weigh, and you'd see whether you gained weight or lost weight. So this is her feedback loop. This is a weekly feedback loop. People didn't have scales back then, at least not a lot, because they weren't that small yet and they weren't cheap enough. And so all this decisions she made, all the choices she made, all the actions she took over the week, she had no real sense of feedback of whether she was doing the right thing. So obviously, if she's going through the full box of chocolates, half box of chocolates sort of decision making, she's making a lot of choices, and this is the only time she's going to find out whether her progress is there. Now we can get instantaneous feedback, right? There's no time delay now. It's in real time, and we can go that, and we can connect it to apps and connect it to other data and connect it to progress and stuff. And so I think we almost take for granted where we've come from. Just think about if you wanted feedback on your finances 20 years ago, you're only going to get it when you bothered to reconcile your checkbook, and then that might be wrong or right. It was highly manual. Maybe you had spreadsheets then that did the heavy lifting for the math. Then you might have had Microsoft Money and Quicken to help you with some visualizations, but only by the time you did it. Then you have things like Mint, where you actually can just give your credentials. That's essentially the sensors, is you give your credentials, and it's reading the data from your financial institutions. And now I can get pinged every time I make any purchase I want, or if somebody using my card, like my wife makes a purchase, I can see all that. So we have these real-time feedback loops that are pretty incredible. But feedback loops are inherently limited. Doesn't mean they're not great, and doesn't mean we even tap their full potential, but there's a ceiling to feedback loops, and the inherent flaw in them is that they're after the fact. That's feedback after you take action. So you've already taken that action, whatever it's good or it's bad, and then you're getting a feedback loop for it. And that's why I think a lot about feed forward, because feed forward loops are guidance of what will happen if you take a certain action. So you're actually going to sort of see into the future and see what would happen if you did that. And the best way to illustrate it is where I wish I had a better feed-forward loop, and that is when I go to the sandwich shop near my office, I know all this stuff, right? I kind of have studied and gotten into all these smart people who are doing things around psychology and get the behavior economics. So in a way, I should know better. I should say, like, oh, I get the half box of chocolates thing, and I should make some rational decisions. But I don't. I'm weak. I get the sandwich, and I go to the sandwich store, I get the sandwich, and I get a soda, and then I also think, well, that shouldn't be too bad. I worked out yesterday. And then by the register, and it's kind of choice architecture in a dark pattern, they have the cookies right there. And I always get a couple cookies just because I just know that they're going to be really good, and I have a huge sweet tooth. So what I wish would happen is that there'd be something like an app or something that would be really smart geolocation. And the moment I walked into the sandwich shop, it would say, well, you're about to walk into a sandwich shop. You've set a goals for your diet. And so if you take this choice, here's what you're going to do. And some sort of visualization that tells me, like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to maybe bust my goal. I'm going to maybe set back. But if I did this, if I sort of made another choice, I'd feel a sense of rewarded. It's like making the full box of chocolates a little more tangible, a little more closer to me, where it's like, oh, if I do this, I'll be on track and I'll feel good about it. Just like a lot of the feedback loops we get on things like activity trackers. And so That's a feed-forward thing because I haven't made the decision yet. See, we talked about habits and decisions. And then if I do this enough, hopefully it'll become automatic and it'll be ingrained as a habit. But what I really need help with is making a sound decision that's in my best interest. That's often what we're really asking of these products and services, or that we're hoping that will be revealed to us. And so that's, we talked about the sensors and the collection of data. We're talking a little bit about the feedback and feed forward. Then the framing and anchors, that's kind of the storytelling. So when you do feedback, what is it that you're doing? Right now we're just feeding the data back, right? And there's a little lack of synthesis happening. We're not necessarily turning that yet into information. I'm not criticizing those products and services. I'm saying we're just not there yet, first things first. But we need to start turning it into information and turning it into knowledge. But that's a pretty powerful thing you can do. And what I like to refer to is one of our biggest intellects in talking about how we think about it. And one of the reasons I used the Nike Fuel as an example is because there's so much data that we now have to go through. Cognitive shortcuts that help us make sense of that are really important. And we don't want to necessarily figure out. This is why computers were born, right? To do math for us. That's how they started, is like, go crunch some numbers for us so that we don't have to, and you can do it faster and better than us. And so I heard like a critique of the Nike Fuel points because they're saying that it was arbitrary. And I was like, it doesn't matter that it's arbitrary as long as it's consistent. Because right now there's lots of, I can do steps, I can do elevation, I can do calories, and there's other things with other trackers that I can track, resting heart rate. And if you're quantified self, and I am a little bit, I like to get into those numbers, but these are mass consumer devices. People don't want to necessarily have a relationship with their data. What they want is help achieving their behavior-based goals. And I think that's really important. And when we do that better, and we do some of the synthesis and some of the heavy lifting, the thing that technology is really good at, then we're going to be better at doing that for them. And one of the ways I like to illustrate it is the fact that numbers often are arbitrary, but we get used to them. And so what these are 4 numbers that represent the maximum of a scale or a scoring system. And to help you out a little bit to kind of guess what they might be, here's examples of if they're pretty bad, and here's examples of if they're good. Can someone tell me what 850 is for? Yeah, credit score, right? If you're in the 400s, you're in kind of a bad shape. And if you're in the 700s, you're not doing too bad. Can anyone tell me what the 158.3 is? No, it's a quarterback rating. If you follow football, it's passer efficiency rating. That's a very arbitrary number, 158.3, but it's, there's yards and interceptions and touchdowns, and somehow they have it at 158.3. But if you care about football and you see that the ratings for different quarterbacks 2 or 3 or 4 times, you kind of get it. 50 is bad. Anything over 80 is actually really good or pretty good, and anything in the 100s is really good. 2400. This one might be hard because, and I'll give you a hint that oh, see, I didn't know. I was like 1600. That's what it was when I was a kid. Yeah. Anyone have an idea of this 100? If you're looking at this, so you think it's like the grading scale. Like the 100 would seem pretty simple, right? But this is actually a grading scale on 50 to 100 for wine. And so if you read Wine Enthusiast, Wine Spectator, you never see a wine that gets 50 points or even 60 points. Bad wines get 80 points, and so that doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So these are numbers, but they're consistent and they're learned, and maybe it actually might even cause more confusion if they all were 100-point scales, and 90 and 80 and 70 were, great, okay, and mediocre. But they're not, because there's certain data that has to go into it, certain algorithms. But we get used to it, and if we care about any of these stats, we understand them, and that's why I'm okay with whether it's Nike or it's another type of thing, saying like, well, what is your credit score? Or what is your credit health? Or what is your fuel points? Or what they are? Because they actually help most people understand how they're getting towards their goal. Because we don't want to necessarily sit there and measure each data scale and then measure how they're related to each other. Habits. And so we talked about decisions and a lot of these things that help us make decisions. Habits are really hard. Big habits are really, really, really hard, and small habits can even be hard. And what you hope is if you make certain little decisions often enough, you'll be in good shape. I really like the Basis Watch for one reason particularly is the habits that it helps form. And that's the fact that it sat there and said, okay, unlock a new habit. Why don't you take a lap, walk around the block in the morning, like a coffee break, like at 10 a.m., and you'll get 1,000 steps. And then maybe you lock a second one that's like, do that again in the afternoon. So around 3 o'clock, get up and walk around the block. And what's good is when I'm active, it's not a big problem. Like if I run or I bike that day, or on the weekend, it's not a big deal because I play with my family and stuff. But when I don't exercise on a work day, I'm only doing like 3,000 steps. And so it's not that much. So if I do this 2 or 3 times a day, I'm at least 50% to doubling my activity. And it's made these little small habits that cumulatively take about 5 minutes a day. It takes me like 3 minutes to walk around the block. So forming these habits can be really important, and what they are, they're gradual. And that's the one pitfall that some of these products and services, whether they're financial services or their health or their energy, is that they think that they're going to say behavior change right out of the box. All this stuff, these decisions, these habits, are cumulative, they're additive, and you have to actually say that this is a progress and it's a journey. And so making sure that you think small and that you think cumulatively is really where you're going to help people achieve their goals. So we've got the technology, I think. We're starting to hit a plateau. We're figuring out the hardware, we get the sensors, and we understand the psychology. A lot of these psychology concepts have been sort of mainstreaming or tipping pointed over the past 3 to 5 years, even though they've been around a lot longer. But now that we've realized that there's a real relevance and alignment with technology that we're doing, we've started to really dive into some of these things. But we're still going through the middle end a little bit. We're still trying to figure out, okay, we have our new electric guitar, but is it more than an amplified guitar? I mean, we're kind of like, when will the Jimi Hendrix come around and show us how it's unique in itself? And a lot of that is to understand like how smart is smart. We're smart collecting, right? And we're smart just mirroring it back. But I think we can do better synthesis. I think we'll be able to add context a little better. And I think we'll be even better than at the prescriptive guidance. And I think with the relationships that they're building, people are actually going to want that and desire that. And also, one last example is that of where I want that smarts to occur is if I use that Nike Plus fuel band and I go on a streak, I hit my goal, my fuel points goal, multiple days in a row. It says, yay, you have a 3-day streak, or hey, great, you have a 7-day streak. And at one point it got to the point where it was like, you have a 14-day streak. That's the longest streak you've had. That's really great. I kind of thought there was something wrong with that. I was like, it should say something like this. I should be setting higher goals. 14 days, I'm meeting the goals. How hard can they be, right? I mean, I need to maybe raise the bar a little bit. And it should know that, and it should help me raise the bar. So in thinking about that, we think about these feedback loops, and we talk about how we as designers can influence people's behavior. But I think it's a two-way street. And I always look at the fact that we can also have an impact from other people. I want to almost craft my own perfect tracking system, because there was always something I liked about all of them. And right now, the problem is they're getting a little bit clumped together when they really are serving different needs and different purposes. A Fitbit and a Nike Plus really serve two different markets and help people in different ways. I know for me, this is just my personal way, there was something I liked about all of them, and I think they're all doing a good job. I've met a bunch of people that worked on these, and I know they're, in a sense, fighting the good fight. Like, they really have an intention of having a positive impact on people's lives. I like the basis because of the habits, and the habits are really great, and that helped me, actually increase my activity during the day. I really liked the Jawbone Up because of the haptic response. It was a cue. So if I started a habit, if that thing told me that I was going to start to engage in the habit, I think that'd be really smart. It's like the call to action when we're donating the Red Cross. The fuel band was great because of that aggregate progress score. I really think that's helpful because there is a lot of data that I can track, and I don't want to know each individual scale, and I don't necessarily know how they relate to each other, so I can get a picture. It'll probably be better, and it can always improve, but I do think there's merit in that score. I like the Misfit Shine, the little disc one, not only just for the hardware and that it's waterproof, but it's been really good at understanding context. It knows if you're cycling or if you're swimming, or you can set it up to understand that. And whether you've kind of did some activity that was like moderate or real rigorous activity. So I like the context, the direction of it's going with regards to recognizing context. And I like the Withings Pulse, which is one of the newer ones, because it fits in with an ecosystem. I have the Withings scale, I have the Withings blood pressure monitor because I have high blood pressure, and it connects with my Runkeeper. So I can get an actual sort of ecosystem and a big picture of my health. So they're all starting to do really interesting things, and it's going to be about individual priority. But in the end, it is about understanding how we can influence people's behavior. But I like this quote from Paul Antonelli from MoMA, who talks about how we could also then look at what kind of impact people's behavior has on design. So it should be a two-way street. It should be a feedback loop that we're having with the consumers of our products and services. And on that note, I thank you for the time.